So this question from a student in one of my webinars previously goes as follows. I want to do a PhD to help companies in financial distress. My company was liquidated in July, so that means it went bankrupt, I presume. I want to make an empirical contribution. Am I doing the PhD for the right reason, or is it just emotion? Okay, very interesting. So I think what this question is dealing with is when something of significance happens to you as a person. Now, clearly, this person experienced some trauma as a result of their company going under and possibly had a financial impact on their lives and their family potentially. And we know that the 2020 has been a tough year with the coronavirus and the lockdowns, which has affected economies and probably had many of these types of situations. So now a student's typical response, and this sounds very familiar to what I would say, is to analyze and then try and make a contribution to prevent or solve a problem in future. So we're interested as students in understanding the world around us to make it a better place. Ultimately, that is the contribution that we want to make. All of science and academics and research goes into increasing our knowledge, increasing our understanding, increasing our ability to predict and to understand. And so in the business world, if we can understand what causes financial distress in companies, then potentially because of that improved understanding, we can then potentially prevent those things from happening or take steps to avoid them or to respond to those issues a little better. There's some sort of framework, I guess, or some theoretical development or insights that the student wants to contribute. And empirical research simply means measuring and sort of developing a pattern of sorts that you justify on the basis of a statistically significant sample of information that you've gathered from the field. So I guess the last sentence there, am I doing the PhD for the right reason or is it just emotion? Well, what I teach in my courses and how I coach my students is that your topic must give you sufficient meaning to last you through your degree. And if it's going to be a PhD, it's going to be 4, 5, maybe 6 years. And the worst thing is to do a topic that you don't feel that strongly about, or you don't have a strong enough connection to it. It's not going to keep you going, and you're going to struggle to put in the late nights and all the hard work that it's going to take you to get through it. So I don't think that they're doing the PhD for the wrong reason. I think it's a great reason to do it because they've lived through it. I think the one thing that they should just be careful of is researcher bias. So because of their experience, they may have a negative perception that they've associated one of those factors, and they have to, establish from a philosophical perspective what is their positioning when they go into the field. Are they a fully detached researcher that can objectively look at the facts and gather the data? Are they intimately involved in what's happening in the field and are then part and parcel of the data gathering and the analysis? And if they've had this life, you know, issue happen to them because of this financial distress, there could be a tendency to create an emotional attachment to data points. And when you, as a researcher, step back and look at your data and you try and analyze it, you must, either account for that bias that you will subconsciously impose on the data and the process of creating a theory or testing an existing theory, or you have to use a methodology that preserves that objectivity. Typically a qualitative research methodology will allow some of that bias to creep in, but you can then factor it out and you can account for it in your results. A much more statistical or quantitative research method is going to bring in a lot more objectivity and will automatically reduce some of that researcher bias. And there's pros and cons of both, so so because of this person's experience with this issue, they've got a high degree of theoretical sensitivity. So they understand the issues at play that they might not have if they did it with a purely statistical or quantitative method. But again, that could bias it and not give us the true objective, theoretical understanding that we need of that situation. Either way, the fantastic thing is that, research must build on other research. And so if this person was to do this work and there was some bias that they had to account for, they just simply state that in their final report, in the limitations possibly, or at least in their methodology when they position themselves philosophically. And I teach on this in my courses in some detail. But then very importantly, at the end, when they're talking about future work, they should then ask other people to test, the theory that they've developed, or the results that they've found, with other samples and in other relevant and comparable fields. And then you start to triangulate based on a number of different studies. So if you then put those together, then you can start sort of really building up a bit of a pattern. And that's when research starts to become incredibly powerful, because if you take one emotional person that's had a bad experience, no matter how good their research methodology is, it's only going to be up to a certain level and make a certain amount of contribution. When you combine that with a couple of other similar studies by different researchers doing comparable work, that then starts to become incredibly powerful. So I think they're doing the PhD for the right reason. I think there is some emotion in it. That's not a bad thing to establish a good topic, as long as you describe it well. And there are videos on this channel to help you develop a good thesis statement. But what you must just be careful of is the researcher bias that could creep into the work you're doing, and you can absolutely account for that in your results.